people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of his big fight tomorrow night, Shakur Stevenson says, Emmanuel Navarette is distracting us from the fact that I should be fighting Vasyl Lomachenko next.
We've been hearing this and that about a potential Shakur Stevenson versus Emmanuel Navarette fight sometime down the line, though Emmanuel himself recently stated that he wants to unify his division first, and he may yet get the chance.
Shakur Stevenson himself said, I think that's a distraction fight. I think that's distracting us from the fact that I should be fighting Vasyl Lomachenko next. I think that me and Lomachenko is the big pay-per-view fight that should happen. I think that Navarette is somebody that's thrown out there as a distraction.
I think that the people at Top Rank put Shakur Stevenson and Emmanuel Navarette on the same show for a reason, and it's because they're laying the foundations for that fight. That doesn't necessarily mean that will be the next fight for either combatant.
But it is an idea that they're playing with, perhaps for some time next year or a little further out. We know that Emmanuel Navarette recently stated that he's open to fighting Shakur, but before he does that, he would like to see about unifying with the other champions at his weight before moving up to lightweight. Shakur stated, I don't think Navarette is as good as Lomachenko. We've seen Lomachenko in his last fight. He looked real good in his last fight. So honestly, I'm down to fight Navarette. I would love to fight him, but I think it's just throwing us off from the fact that we're supposed to be in the ring with Vasyl Lomachenko next.
Vasyl Lomachenko, who after that controversial loss to Devin Haney, decided to take the rest of the year off and is rumored to be returning to the ring at some point next year in the land down under in Australia opposite the ring, George Kambosos, for what could be the newly vacated IBF title.
Devin.
He's still IBF champion. He still has the title, but you have to figure that between now and next year, if Vasyl Lomachenko ends up fighting George Kambosos and he beats him, he will become Devin Haney's mandatory challenger. And I don't think Devin Haney is returning to the lightweight division, and I don't think Devin Haney wants a rematch with Lomachenko. So in all likelihood, he's going to drop that belt.
At which point, Vasyl Lomachenko may become a 3-time lightweight champion, and then maybe he can unify with the winner of tomorrow's fight.
De Los Santos versus Stevenson. Shakur S. Stevenson, who says, it's cool, I ain't tripping on that. I'm just saying, let's really think about it. Lomachenko said he wanted to take the rest of the year off. That's basically his excuse for not fighting me in November. So why not in his first fight back, come fight me next year? But we've got to get past De Los Santos first, so I can't keep talking about what's next until I handle business on Thursday. The fight between Shakur S. Stevenson and Vasyl Lomachenko could be bigger next year if it involves 2 alphabet titles instead of just one. Instead of the WBC title that will be on the line tomorrow night, the newly vacated WBC title that Devin Haney used to hold, and it still escapes people.
Devin Haney was WBC champion, wasn't he? And Devin Haney was ordered to fight Shakur Stevenson as his mandatory challenger, and now Devin Haney's title is vacant, and he's up there at 140.
Devin Haney, who's been doing the rounds on several podcasts. Devin Haney, who's been telling every man, woman, and his dog that Shakur Stevenson walked away from a fight with him. But if Shakur's the one that walked away, then why is your title now vacant, and why does he still have a title shot? If he were the one that walked away, the shot would have went to somebody else. He wouldn't still have it now.
And we've been all through that. He's got to take care of business tomorrow night against De Los Santos, which would in effect set up a fight between him and the winner of Lomachenko versus Kambosos.
Maybe asking yourself, where does that leave Top Rank's plan to put Emmanuel Navarette in the ring with Shakur Stevenson? Because I still think that's their plan, a long-term plan. Well, for the time being, no, I don't think he's moving up. He's He said he wants to unify, and he may yet get the chance, as news broke earlier today that Top Rank has signed WBC Super Featherweight champion O'Shaquie Foster to a multi-fight deal. So now, they don't just have one of the champions at Super Featherweight on their side of the street, they have two.
O'Shaquie Foster was in action not but a few weeks ago opposite the ring at Eduardo Hernandez, south of the border, as part of a Matchroom show. And on that show, O'Shaquie was the away fighter. It was Eduardo that had the Matchroom deal, but O'Shaquie did what he had to do to stay champion.
And I think now, as a top-ranked fighter, he is going to reap the benefit for having done so. He likely has a decent-looking guarantee that he will make fight by fight in the ultimate build-up of an Emmanuel Navarette showdown. I believe O'Shaquie did express some interest in unifying titles, and we know that Navarette wants to. The other two champions at the weight, Hector Luis Garcia, WBA champion, and Joe Cordina, IBF champion. Joe's looking at a Lee Wood fight, and that's a big fight across the pond. That's a big fight in the United Kingdom for next year. And Hector is going to be defending his WBA title against Lamont Roach very soon. He's coming right off that knockout loss to Gervonta Davis, so let's see if he can stay WBA champion.
If he does, he better cross the street. He better go to Top Rank. All the meaningful fights for a super featherweight champion seem to be over there on the Top Rank side of things. Most of them. He can either go to Top Rank and see about fighting Emmanuel Navarette or O'Shaquie Foster, or he can try his luck at Matchroom. See if he can't get a Joe Cordina fight.
You have to remember, at this time, the PBC don't have an official broadcast partner, and rumor has it all they've got to play with is an Amazon distribution deal geared towards pay-per-views. They're not actually making a commitment to the PBC or giving them an annual budget to make fights and fight dates. If Hector Luis Garcia stays champion and he wants to stay busy, he needs to either go to Top Rank or go to Matchroom. But you can't stay on the island. You've got to go.
And that is the lay of the land at 130 pounds. That's what's going on.
In other news, we saw the kickoff press conference earlier today for Saudi Arabia and Riyadh season's Day of Reckoning, set to go down December 23rd. Lots of familiar faces, a big buzz around this card that seems almost impromptu.
Because you have to remember, initially, it was supposed to be Fury and Usyk boxing on the 23rd. Then those plans changed to a potential ring return for Francis Ngannou, plans that were quickly scrapped. And then they came up with this. They had this in their back pocket, and I think for the most part, the fans like it. The fans are excited.
Save one or two boo birds that are complaining that it's not Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder boxing each other in the main event.
I'm excited. Me personally, I love the whole show. I love the whole thing, and you have to remember what's going to be happening 3 days later. On the 23rd, we're going to be seeing the Day of Reckoning show in Saudi Arabia. Then on the 26th, we're going to be seeing Naoya Inoue vie to become a two-time undisputed champion and a champion at 4 weights overall opposite the ring unified champion Marlon Tapales.
That following Tuesday, a few takeaways from today's kickoff press conference. Things didn't really heat up. They didn't really liven up until they let Jarrell Big Gravy Miller.
He had a little something for everybody. He had a few choice words for Daniel Dubois, for Deontay Wilder, but mostly for Anthony Joshua. He's still fixated on Anthony Joshua. As it pertains to Jarrell's fight with Daniel Dubois,
we know that Daniel is coming off that loss to Alexander Usyk, a loss where many people feel that he gave up and gave in. A lot of people feel that he quit. And Jarrell Miller, being as physically imposing as he is, being that mid-range to inside pressure fighter and volume puncher,
it doesn't behoove Daniel Dubois to stand in one spot and trade punches with Jarrell, because that's what Jarrell wants. So do you trust Daniel Dubois to box around him, beat those feet, stay behind his jab, and set up Jarrell?
That's how you have to handle a mid-range to inside pressure fighter. A fighter that's going to barrel forward and throw punches in bunches once he gets there. You don't sell out and give them what they want. You box around them. And while I do feel that Daniel Dubois has enough power, enough explosivity to maybe hurt Jarrell Miller.
Maybe.
What if he doesn't? What if he doesn't get Jarrell Miller out of there early? I feel like Daniel Dubois' best bet to win this thing is an early knockout. But if he can't get one, and Jarrell Miller is still standing there, still in front of him, as we go into the mid and later rounds, it doesn't behoove Daniel Dubois.
It doesn't.
He doesn't have the intestinal fortitude for a fight like that. At least he hasn't had it in the past.
You know, he was hurt by Kevin Lorena, a cruiserweight who moved up in weight, and he was stopped by Alexander Usyk. None of these fighters are as physically imposing as a Jarrell Miller. This guy can weigh upwards of 300 pounds.
You get the sense that if those guys had enough mustard on their shots to hurt Daniel Dubois, then surely Jarrell Miller, who's noticeably bigger, very aggressive, he'll have enough mustard on his shots to hurt Daniel. So it's not an easy out for Daniel. What feels like a sink or swim fight.
He has to prove his worth.
It's not an easy out. I don't think it is. If they wanted to put Daniel in an easy layup fight, a gimme fight, a rebound fight, a simple rebound fight, they would have stuck him in there with Manuel Char or somebody like that. They stuck him in there with an unbeaten Jarrell Miller who still wants to make a splash and still wants to make a statement. For me and my money, a fighter with more dog than Daniel Dubois.
A fighter who has more dog, in tandem with Daniel's reputation for giving up and giving in when faced with adversity. That's an added chip on Jarrell's shoulder.
I don't think it's far-fetched to say that Jarrell Miller could win this fight on December 23rd, and if he does, that would line him up for even bigger fights. The elephant in the room, what could be the Anthony Joshua fight, the fight that he's been waiting for, the fight that he's always wanted. I mean, just imagine if Deontay Wilder, for some reason, he doesn't take care of business with Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker shocks the world.
Just imagine that something happens to Wilder and he can't fight Anthony next year.
You could just as easily swap that out for Joshua versus Miller, because there's just as much history and there's just as much bad blood between them. That if Jarrell Miller takes care of business with Daniel Dubois and Anthony takes care of business with Otto Wallin, and if for some reason Wilder can't fight, I don't know, Joseph Parker shocks the world or Wilder is injured.
Don't misunderstand me. The Wilder fight is the focus. The Wilder fight and finally delivering it takes precedence over any other fight that's out there right now for Anthony. But if for some reason that fight can't happen, I'll take a Jarrell Miller fight.
Because Jarrell Miller, for all his faults and all his drawbacks, he is a talented trash talker, and he really added an element of excitement that wasn't there up until he started talking. Renewed interest in what could be a Joshua versus Miller fight, it's definitely there, and he definitely left an impression. Let's not pretend that Anthony wouldn't like to punch a hole in this guy's face. I'm sure that he would. And if by some chance it doesn't work out between Anthony and Deontay, Anthony and Jarrell,
I'll buy that for $1.
what looks to be a Queensbury Promotions show, I get the sense that there's gonna be more than one distributor. I get the sense that maybe TNT will carry the pay-per-view in the United Kingdom, and DAZN will distribute the pay-per-view to all the other markets, all those foreign markets that they cater to, because TNT, that's a UK broadcaster specific to the UK, whereas DAZN is a global streaming platform.
Though for using so many of Matchroom's fighters, you do have to wonder, what do they need with Frank? What do they need from Frank?
Anthony Joshua, Jai Opataya, and Dmitry Bivol, they're with Matchroom in some ways, so is Filip Hrgovic.
Deontay Wilder's not with Queensbury, and neither is Joseph Parker, neither is Otto Wallin.
Or Junior Fa, or Frankie Sanchez. It's confusing.
But I wish you nothing but the best, even if it doesn't happen. But I believe it's going to happen. I believe it will. It's about that time. But even if it don't, I wish you nothing but the best, nothing less.
Most people were expecting heated exchanges and melees between Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, who have been at odds with each other for many years now. In fact, it was just a few days ago that Deontay Wilder was telling the media, and anyone who would listen, that he wants to fly to the UK. He knows that AJ is scared of him, this and that. I mean, how much time was spent on that narrative, propping it up, that AJ is terrified of?
A few days ago when Wilder said he wants to fly to the UK to talk to Anthony, he wanted to fly to the UK to tell him he wishes him nothing but the best because That's all he did.
Wilder was more cordial than we expected him to be when in Anthony Joshua's presence. And what it reminded me of is when Jermell Charlo was in the presence of Canelo Alvarez. Oh yeah, when he's away, when he's got a camera in front of him, he'll say this and that. But when he's right there, sharing the same space with that same guy, the energy is not the same. And I do feel like that's the case here between Deontay and Anthony. Jarrell Miller ended up stealing the show. He showed more spirit.
You could argue maybe the reason Deontay was on his best behavior is because he's not fighting Anthony in December. He's not fighting Anthony. Not yet. But we could say the same thing about Jarrell Miller, and he didn't have any hair on his tongue. He said what he felt he needed to say, whereas Deontay was a lot more user-friendly, a lot more polite.
I'd be lying to you if I told you that I wasn't excited when I watched Deontay walk out in a different decorum, a different setting than the one that we're used to seeing him in. We're used to seeing him inside of that PBC bubble, and for once, I think he made the right choice. I think he made the right decision.
It was nice seeing him there, surrounded by all those familiar faces, and for what it's worth, I actually very much like the Joseph Parker fight. It's an intriguing fight, and would be a solid win for Deontay Wilder, even at this point in his career. But I can't help but notice that the energy wasn't what you expected. It wasn't the same away from Anthony Joshua as it was when he's actually in the room, when you're faced with him.
Anthony Joshua himself, wearing his mood on his face and his heart on his sleeve. Nobody gets under this guy's skin more than Jarrell Miller, not even Deontay Wilder. And you could see that Anthony Joshua was visibly vexed. He would have liked to have walked across the room and slapped Jarrell Miller in the mouth.
And you noticed that he didn't have no patience for Dev Sani. He didn't want to answer any of his questions. He would only address his own promoter, Eddie Hearn.
No time for Dev Sani, Queensberry Promotions' resident presenter. It was an excellent press conference, and the card itself really is a pleasant surprise because I wasn't sure we were going to get anything like this towards year's end, but here we are, and I am excited for it. He's got to take care of business with Otto Wallin, and I feel like all of this has lit a fire under Anthony that perhaps wasn't there before the press conference. I mean, he really seems motivated, and he wants to send a message.
I don't know of any bad blood between Anthony and Otto Wallin. It's Otto who he's going to be fighting in December, after all, not Jarrell Miller and not Deontay Wilder. We're not there yet.
But to stand on business and to make it to those other fights, he has to make it through Otto Wallin. Questions as to how Otto is going to approach this fight. Is he going to go for the gusto the way he did with Tyson Fury, or will he take a more cerebral approach, how he normally boxes, moving lateral and staying behind his jab?
Because he's not a characteristically aggressive fighter, in spite of what we saw in the Fury fight, what seems like an isolated incident. He chose to rise to the occasion.
But at that time, Fury didn't have a reputation for being a puncher. In fact, he didn't get that reputation until the second Wilder fight, which took place before that, whereas Anthony, he had the reputation for being a puncher. He still has the reputation for being a puncher. So will Otto get froggy with him?
We'll find out on December 23rd.